Diddy is going to prison. Hi, I'm Melba Pearson, also known as the Resident Legal Diva, and this probably may be the last Daily Diddy. So I brought you daily updates from the P. Diddy trial until we got a verdict, and then, of course, shared a lot of what happened in the aftermath, including numerous lawsuits and all of that. Well, the highly anticipated moment arrived yesterday where P. Diddy learned his sentence. And so this was a dramatic 5-hour extravaganza in the courtroom where both the prosecution and the defense made vigorous arguments in terms of what they thought an appropriate sentence should be. The prosecution was asking for 11 years in prison. Remember, he was found guilty of 2 counts of transportation for purposes of prostitution, also known as under the Mann Act, and he faced a maximum of 10 years in prison for each of those counts. So he faced a total of 20 years in prison. So the prosecution was asking for 11, the defense was asking for 14 months, which basically would have been credit for time served since he had been in jail for about a year after he got arrested, after that whole search in Star Island and all of that, right? So that amount of time that he was waiting in jail for trial and all of that, he gets credit for that time. So basically they were like, hey, let him out, right? So some of the key things that were said. First off, you had the prosecution saying that his violence was something that the public needed to be protected from. They talked about how he was unrepentant, didn't learn his lesson, and that a message needed to be sent, especially keeping in mind this is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. So a message needs to be sent to abusers as well as survivors that, listen, this isn't okay. Now, on the defense side, the defense counsel at certain points, some of the defense team were holding back tears, and they talked about how much Diddy overcame to become so successful. They talked about his work in social justice and trying to uplift communities of color, that he's a changed man, and that, and again, still throwing shade that these were kind of consensual acts and, it's just toxic relationships, nothing to see here, right? And sadly, his kids got up, all 6 of them, and, they were crying and saying, they wanted their dad to be released and, they were going to miss him and, that he's, not the horrible person he was portrayed to be in the courtroom. And then most dramatically, Diddy got up and started crying and basically pleading for mercy and pleading for his life. He said that I lost my businesses and I lost my career and destroyed my reputation. And most importantly, I lost my self-respect. I've been humbled to my core. I hate myself right now. I've been stripped down basically to nothing. Well, the judge was hearing none of it. The judge basically was like, first off, the judge considered some of the acts that he was acquitted for. So remember, he was charged with RICO, so basically racketeering and conspiracy, running, like a criminal organization. And he also was facing 2 counts of sex trafficking. So he was acquitted of those 3 counts, but the judge was like, listen, I was sitting here, I heard everything, and I'm going to take all of that into consideration in terms of what the appropriate sentence should be, not just the 2, you transported people for the purposes of prostitution, right? So that was his mindset there. And he said that basically that Diddy did not express remorse for his prostitution convictions, and basically his viewpoints were inconsistent with reality and his accepting responsibility. So the judge gave him 50 months in prison. So basically 4 years and 2 months plus 5 years of supervised release plus a $500,000 fine, which is the maximum allowable by law. Now, I was guessing he was going to get in the realm of 5 to 7 years. A pre-sentence investigation, which I had mentioned in a previous video, how they go out and they, being the Department of Probation Parole, goes out, they do an investigation to figure out what the most appropriate sentence should be. They came back with 5 to 7 years. I don't know what his guidelines were. So guidelines are basically a formula that you plug in based on, that's something that prosecutors do. You put in the severity of the crime, if they had any priors, were people injured, that sort of thing. And there's a calculation and it spits out a number. I'm guessing it was probably in the realm of 50 months, which is why the judge gave him that, because I don't get the vibe that the judge would have deviated from the guidelines, meaning going below or something like that. So there's that. And a couple things that Diddy did that did not help his defense, or basically help his, position of sentencing. Well, he was out here making speaking engagements, like he was going to be out next week. Some people argued, oh no, he's just trying to speak it into existence and this and that. Sir, you're facing sentencing. That's hella presumptuous. Okay. Like that hubris, that lack of humility when you're facing, 20 years in prison, that was a bad move. And sadly, I know one of the organizations that had, I guess, contracted with him to speak. I don't know I don't think they paid him, but they do great work. But that was a lapse in judgment. Like, no, like, dude hasn't even served his sentence yet. Yes, he's been convicted, but, pay your debts to society and then hold the person up like, hey, they've made good on their life. They've turned themselves around, all of that. He still hasn't really apologized. He kind of mealy mouth apologized, but he did not show real remorse for how he traumatized Cassie and her family and all the stuff that he did to Capricorn Clark, all of these other people. Come on already. So there's that. And so, of course, which was kind of comical throughout this, like funny, not funny, actually. 50 Cent was trolling him left, right, and center. 50 Cent actually wrote a letter to the judge asking for Diddy to receive the max. Now, there's no love lost between the two of them. There is an assertion out there that Jane, who is one of the victims who listed victims in the Diddy case, is the baby mother for 50 Cent. So there's a whole thing going on there. But in his letter, he was talking about the world's need for baby oil and that, that supply wouldn't be safe if Diddy was allowed out. And he also talked about how he was in fear for his life at different times with Diddy, whole other thing. And then afterwards, of course, he trolled and did a whole, I don't know about these groups that booked Diddy, but they're, he's not going to be available, but I am. Which I'm still like, sir, are you the best example too? Not so much, but anywho's in. So now the big question is going to be whether or not he's going to get a pardon, because the legal team for Diddy has confirmed that they reached out to the president seeking a pardon. Now, since it's a federal case, the president can give a pardon if he so chooses. I would not be surprised if he gets a pardon, because the president has made it very clear that he does not view domestic violence to be a crime. And also, it would be a way of trying to curry favor with the Black community and being like, see, I'm not so racist. Look, I pardoned P. Diddy, right? And so there's that. So it's politics and politricks. I'm sure a large donation will show up to one of the president's causes, and then, Diddy will be out. Again, would be sad, but at the end of the day, he was convicted. The judge gave him an appropriate sentence. And with the, time in prison, he's also going to have to do what supervised release is, basically probation. So, if you screw up, you do anything, you end up going to prison basically for the max you were facing. So there's that in the mix. Now, folks may be wondering, yeah, he got 4 years and 2 months. So when is he getting out? Well, he's not going to do 4 years and 2 months. He already did a year in custody waiting for trial. So that gets subtracted. So now we're looking at 3 years and 2 months. And then there's also something called gain time or good behavior. So if you're in prison and you don't get into fights, you don't cause problems, you take remedial courses. When I say remedial, I mean in terms of like therapy and stuff like that to kind of work on how you got here, right? That sort of thing, or get a degree and those types of things, you get credit. So that means more time is taken off your sentence. So I'd say he's going to get out in the next 18 months to just under 2 years is my guess as to when he's going to get out. That could be sooner if he gets a pardon. So again, we'll see on that. So I'm just going to wrap this up by saying, again, this is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And the one thing that pissed me off in seeing a lot of the comments and the discussion around this case was the whole Cassie was there because she wanted the money and she could have left anytime she wanted. Did y'all miss how this trial went? That video of her getting beaten at the Intercontinental Hotel in Los Angeles, that was her trying to leave him. She tried to leave. He beat her every time. So at some point you're like, you know what? Let me just figure out another way to like get through this because, and she was suicidal at some points. So like I don't understand why people just don't get that. And another time was when she had tried to leave and basically Diddy kidnapped Capricorn Clark. That is testimony that came out in trial. And he put Capricorn Clark on the phone. He said, call Cassie and tell her you're not going to be able to go anywhere until she comes back to me. So every time he tried to leave, he sent staff after her. He sent security after her. He blackmailed her family. I mean, this guy was hella evil to her. So I just want folks to think about this in the context of Domestic Violence Awareness Month, because if this happens to someone you love, are you going to be like, well, she just wants to be there, or are you going to try to get her help? Think real deep, folks, because 1 in 3 women experience domestic violence in this country. So someone you know has experienced it, but do they feel comfortable enough to tell you? So there's that. All right. Well, I'm Melba Pearson, also known as the Resident Legal Diva, and this is the Daily Diddy. Stay tuned for me covering other high-profile cases over the course of the next few months. Be sure to like, follow, subscribe to my YouTube channel. Follow me on socials, Resident Legal Diva, and I'll catch you later. Take care.